Hey guys, I just wanted to go over the literary analysis with you guys real quick. So you can see I have two windows open on my screen. I'm just going to go over a few things on the literary analysis and then I'll show you how to add in some quotes. So the first thing that we need to go over is what is the literary analysis. The first thing you want to do is to be able to understand what is being asked of you. So, a literary analysis is for you to analyze the literary piece of literature. For this one, we're doing The Revenant. So, there's a bunch of different ways that you can do it. You can analyze it through the scope of looking at the characters, you can analyze it looking at the use of nature in both the movie and the book. You can analyze the difference between the movie and the book or the similarities. You can also take a deeper look into the author Michael Punk. All of these can be done multiple of different ways. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is to identify the work that you are analyzing, which is the Revenant by Michael Punk. Okay. Then you want to state your question. So if I am analyzing, let's say, the character of Fitzgerald, okay, so you want to phrase it in a question and you'll show how your essay answers that question. So I could write, was Fitzgerald the Okay, was Fitzgerald really evil or was he just misunderstood? Okay, so I want to pick out 4 targeted summaries or 4 key points as to why I feel that he was either really evil or just misunderstood. So I can talk about how Fitz was the first to volunteer stay with class. Even though it was for money, it still counts. Fitz was the first to notice Glass had a fever. And let's see, Fitz not that smart. And one last thing, I can say that, let's see, Fitz could have killed us. Right. So if I were taking the perspective that Fitz wasn't really evil, that he was just misunderstood, I could explain that he was the first one that volunteered to stay with Glass. Secondly, he was the first one to notice that Glass had a fever. Thirdly, we know that Fitz wasn't that smart. He ended up killing his only girlfriend because he didn't understand that she was a prostitute. So when he caught her with somebody else, he killed her and the quote unquote fat captain. And then lastly, I can mention that Fitz had numerous times where he could have easily killed Glass and it wouldn't have affected him. He still would have gotten the money and nobody would have suspected anything. Where we could also argue that point that it was even more evil to rob Glass and leave him so wounded out in the woods. All right. And then, so this is why I have the second window open, is because when we get to the quoted material from the text, Google really helps. So we will pull up The Revenant, and you want to make sure you click on the one that says book, okay? And then you're going to go over here to where it says preview book, okay? And that's going to pull up your book in Google. Granted, you can't come here and read the entire book. It will purposely leave out pages, but it will give you a great deal of the pages that you need. But you can see here it jumped from page 3 to 14. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the search bar here, and I am going to search through the book for portions that talk about Fitzgerald. So I'm going to look for 4 different quotes that I can use that will relate to my main points that I mentioned up here, my targeted summary. So let's see, we can find one that shows that Fitz was the first one to volunteer to stay with Glass. So, let's see, Fitzgerald felt the tension. All right, let's. So I added Glass so that I can see the different scenes from the book that have both Glass and Fitzgerald in it. So let's see. All right, so here Captain Henry is talking about how he was unsure how to react. So suspicious was he of Fitzgerald's motive. So page 41 is when he volunteers to stay. So Captain Henry was unsure how to react. So suspicious. All right, so at the end of any quote for MLA, you just need to put the author's last name, which is Punk, and then you put the page number, which we can clearly see here is 41. So now we need to find one that talks about the fever. All right, and if I type in Fitzgerald and fever, we can now see that it says, the next morning, Bridger awoke to find Fitzgerald bent over Glass, his hand pressed against the forehead of the wounded man. "What are you doing, Fitzgerald? How long has he had that fever?" Bridger moved quickly to Glass and felt his skin. All right, so the next morning, Bridger awoke to find Again, we put the author's last name and then the page number, which is page 57, right? And we continue to do this until you pull all the quotes that you need. And then next, you're going to show your interpretation and how your interpretation makes sense. So, for example, my first one is that Fitz was the first to volunteer to stay with Glass. Okay, so here we pulled a quote where we talk about how Fitz was the first one to volunteer, but how Captain Henry was unsure on how to react or how to take it when Fitzgerald volunteered. So that's what you will write down here for the interpretation part. You will show how your interpretation works with the quote that you pulled. So secondly, we will talk about how Fitz was the first to notice Glass had a fever. This can tie into both parts where we talked about Fitz could have killed Glass, because that's exactly what Bridger was afraid of. When he was asking him what he was doing, and the way that Punk writes the page, he's talking about Fitzgerald was bent over Glass and he pressed his hand against the wounded man. So instead of saying Glass